At Unity of Aliso Viejo, we greet you in the name of all that is beautiful and sacred, where we embrace all spiritual paths that teach love. Unity offers a positive path for spiritual living and welcomes people of every creed, color, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation, and people with disabilities. Unity leaves no one out. We also like to say that you are not here by accident, but by divine appointment, and we are so grateful to you that you kept your appointment with Spirit this morning.
Well, happy birthday, United States of America. And everybody repeat that after me. Happy birthday, United States of America. Anybody want to guess how old we are today? 238 years. And in that 238, we have become the most innovative country in the world with the biggest economy, the most powerful military, the most wealth of any nation, and probably the highest ideals of any nation that's ever existed. Now, that's not to say there's not some problems. All you have to do is turn on the radio or TV, and you will find those problems analyzed, magnified, generalized, overstated, distorted, taken out of context, and I'm not going to go there. As we count our many blessings this morning, let's keep in mind the admonishment of Luke, the 12th chapter, the 48th verse. To whom much is given, much is required. Now, let's drop current events and get back to 1776. At that time, we weren't even a nation. We were just 13 British colonies without a central government. We were strewn up and down the east coast of North America, bounded on the east by the Atlantic Ocean and bounded on the west by a great uncharted wilderness. So how did we get from being colonies to nationhood? Let's go back a little bit further. Let's go back to 1763. The British had been winners in the great big war called the 7 Years' War, which actually was really a world war. And they were almost bankrupt. And how does a bankrupt government raise money? They raise taxes. And the British believed that since the 13 colonies were part of the British Empire and had benefited from our part of the victory in the 7 Years' War, which we call the French and Indian War, you may remember that from your history books. Since we had benefited from that, then we should be eligible for taxation. Aha, not so fast, said the colonists, or words to that effect. We have no representatives in Parliament, and taxation without representation is tyranny. And that became the rallying cry and a starting point for the American Revolution. The British tried to control the colonists over the next few years with a series of laws and taxes, and you may remember the names of some of them. There was the Stamp Act. There was the Intolerable Acts, and then there was the tea tax. The latter so enraged the colonists that a group of them, dressed as Indians, sneaked on board a British ship anchored in Boston Harbor and threw the tea overboard. Now, that became known as the Boston Tea Party. And of course, we know the name Tea Party is still prominent in American politics. Some words that live in our history yet today came from this period, particularly a speech given by a wealthy, slave-holding Virginia landowner named Patrick Henry. He thundered out loud in March of 1775, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased with the chains of slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God." Pretty good, huh? "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." Let's say that together. Give me liberty or give me death. Kind of gives you a chill, doesn't it? A little more than a year later, on the 4th of July in 1776, representatives from the colonies signed the Declaration of Independence that included these famous words: "We hold that these truths be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness." And the Declaration stated in conclusion these colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. 56 people signed that declaration. One of those signers was Benjamin Franklin, who was always a man of great wit. And his comment was, "Gentlemen, if we don't hang together, we will most assuredly all hang separately." So, by a few strokes of the pen, we declared ourselves an independent country, the United States of America. And the war, which had already started, continued on. But we were still just a group of independent colonies that, while we had common interests, we had no central government. But that was rectified by instituting what we call the Articles of Confederation, which you may remember from your history lessons. And while the Articles gave us some measure of unification, they provided for no central authority. There was no government. There was no way to raise money other than beg from the various colonies. It almost cost us the war. There wasn't enough money to pay the soldiers. Morale was low. And the army was plagued with desertions. We don't think about that very much these days, do we? It was all such a wonderful time. But desertion was a big problem. And we ran up a huge national debt with no way to pay it. Now, a short side note here. The Articles of Confederation contained an offer of statehood to the French colony of Quebec. They refused the offer. If they had, Cecile probably wouldn't have a French accent, and that would be a loss. Well, the war dragged on, and we gained allies, particularly the Spanish and the French. We don't hear that much about the Spanish, but they were there. And things rarely looked very optimistic for the Americans. However, in October of 1781, the American and French armies trapped the British army on the Virginia peninsula of Yorktown. The British General Lord Cornwallis had no escape by land. The French fleet sailed in, defeated the British fleet at the Battle of Chesapeake Bay, and suddenly the British were trapped. They had no escape by sea. Over 8,000 British troops and their hired mercenaries became prisoners of war at the surrender. To borrow a phrase, major combat operations were over, even though the final peace treaty took another 2 more years to sign. Now, there is a side story to the surrender of Yorktown that I think bears repeating. General Cornwallis had asked for traditional honors for the surrender. In other words, the British troops would march by with their flags flying and their muskets carried proudly, and the band would play an American tune as a sign of respect to the victors. But George Washington remembered the Battle of Charleston, in which the British took Charleston, South Carolina, under our American General Benjamin Lincoln. Washington, thinking of that humiliation, denied Cornwallis's request, and consequently the defeated troops marched with flags furled and muskets reversed in shame. General Cornwallis did not attend the surrender. He claimed he was too sick, and he probably was at the thought of losing his 8,000 men and supplies and equipment to the ragtag rebel army, even though there were more Frenchmen there than we were. But still, it was a victory for the Americans. General Cornwallis decided, since he couldn't attend because he was sick, he gave the sword of surrender to Brigadier General Charles O'Hara, a very good Irishman, to present the sword of surrender to the senior general there, General Rochambeau of France. General Rochambeau declined the sword and motioned towards George Washington. George Washington declined the sword and motioned towards Brigadier General or Major General Benjamin Lincoln, who had been humiliated at Charleston. So it was General Lincoln who took the sword of surrender from the British, and the British humiliation was complete. Meanwhile, the Articles of Confederation, which had proved rather inadequate for running the war, proved equally inadequate for running a government in peacetime. So a convention was convened in Philadelphia in 1787, ostensibly to modify or make recommendations to the Articles of Confederation. However, most of the delegates thought that was a lost cause and that they were going to have to draft a completely new constitution. So through that long, hot summer in Philadelphia, the delegates sweated, debated, argued, compromised, proposed, and some even left tired and disgusted. The convention had started with 55 delegates. Ultimately, only 39 signed the document, and probably none of them were satisfied. But we had a constitution, we had a foundation for our government, and George Washington was elected our first president. And we all know what happened from there, right? Throughout the Constitutional Convention, there had been a proverbial elephant in the room: slavery. Yet the word itself is never mentioned in the Constitution. Many delegates, even slaveholders such as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, had a strong moral revulsion to slavery. However, slavery was the backbone of the Southern economy, and slavery had to be accounted for, and there are at least 3 big compromises in the Constitution. It was slavery or no government at all. The Founding Fathers seemed to believe, or at least hope, that slavery would eventually die of its own accord. How wrong they were. The issues that surrounded slavery eventually resulted in the Civil War, the bloodiest war in our history. Almost 2% of our population lost its life in the Civil War. As comparison, in World War II, the United States lost 1/3 of 1%. The Civil War was indeed a bloody tragedy. Well, let's take a look now at a quick look at the religious beliefs of our Founding Fathers. Now, it is interesting to note that the word slave and slavery did not appear in the Constitution. Neither did the words Jesus or God. The Founding Fathers might be called WASPs, White Anglo-Saxon Protestants, with the exception of one Roman Catholic. Within the Protestants, there was a wide range of beliefs. However, the Founding Fathers seemed fairly unanimous that everyone should have the freedom to follow their own religious beliefs. And so they included in the Constitution a statement that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification for public office. Now, that doesn't mean that you or me can't in our own hearts say we don't want somebody of such and such faith or such and such. But as the government can never, ever, ever ask for a religious qualification. Interesting. George Washington is a rather interesting study. He was officially an Episcopalian. By word and deed, he seemed to be a man of profound faith, but in his public discourse or in his writings, he did not refer to either Jesus nor God, nor did he ever take or routinely take communion. However, he expounded on the importance of a strong religious faith. He believed religion was the basis of morality. He said he believed that good Christians will always be good citizens. And he believed the universe was created by a supreme being. And yet, he believed that, quote, the government should be free from the influence of the clergy. Washington's religious pragmatism and tolerance is exemplified in a letter that he wrote to a contractor who was going to hire workers to work on his home at Mount Vernon. And Washington wrote, if they be good workmen, they may be from Asia, Africa, or Europe. They may be Muslims, Jews, or Christians of any sect, or they may be atheists. In other words, let's get the job done, folks. Now, Benjamin Franklin was probably the other end of religious piety. Once in his later life, he was asked if he believed in the divinity of Jesus. Franklin thought a moment and said in words to this effect, "I've never given it much thought. However, at my advanced age, I think I'll just wait and see." Most of the founding fathers, even those like Episcopalian George Washington, seem to have been influenced to some degree or another by deism. Deism, a philosophy that flourished in the so-called Age of Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries. Deism emphasized reason and science over traditional religious dogma and gained widespread acceptance among intellectuals in both the United States and Europe. Now, concurrent with deism, there was going on in the United States, or the colonies at that time, something we call the Great Awakening, which was an awakening of Protestant fundamentalism furor, if you will. It would seem that the founding fathers were very little influenced by the Protestant awakening, because otherwise we might have had the United Protestant States of America, the UPS of America. But we don't. Now, John Adams, one of those original founding fathers, and the one who probably seemed less influenced by deism than most of the others, said, the Christian religion is, above all religions that ever prevailed or existed in ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. This was the same John Adams who, as second president of the United States, signed a treaty which contained the statement, "The government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." Whoa, 1797. I think the founding fathers had a clear understanding of the difference in a nation being founded on Christian principles as opposed to having Christianity as a state religion. I think many of us have lost that distinction, a distinction that I think is very important. Personally, I see the United States as a nation clearly founded on Christian principles, but one that has taken great care not to have any official state religion. So on this birthday, let's look forward to the future. If the past is prologue to the future, it won't be easy, but it never has been. The U.S. Navy SEALs have a slogan: "The only easy day was yesterday." We tend to look back over the wonderful days of yesteryear with nostalgia. I tend to look back and think, those were the wonderful days that never were. The Barbra Streisand song puts it so eloquently. Could it have been oh so simple then, or has time rewritten every line? Well, one thing for certain, Americans have always had a streak of resilience, and resilient we must remain. We must maintain our constitutional commitment to freedom of the speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and equality for all. We must rise above party and think of the common good. And I would note right here that George Washington did not approve of political parties. He felt that there was a danger of people becoming more loyal to the party than the country and voting for party over principle. I think we would do well to ponder the wisdom of Washington. However, it has been said that democracy is like making sausage. The process is messy, but the results are wonderful. Let's hope that we can keep on making sausage for a long, long time. Now, one last thought. Denise's final song is going to be God Bless America. We're going to have a little sing-along here. I love the song when it is sung with emphasis and enthusiasm. I am uncomfortable with the passiveness that's in some of the recent versions when it says, God bless America. It is so passive. It's asking God to bless us and we have to do nothing. I just really think that in conclusion, that we ought to sing this song with a real vim and vigor. And let us, with our heads held high and eyes firmly fixed on the future, proclaim, Happy birthday, United States of America, and with heartfelt resolution say, America, bless God. And so I ask you to repeat those words. America, bless God. Amen.
This part of our service we call our sacred walk of abundance. The law of giving and receiving is a principle understood by all spiritual traditions. We invite you to experience this principle in body, mind, and spirit. As you feel comfortable, please come forward on either side and take an affirmation blessing from one of the crystal bowls. And if you have a financial offering, please place it in the silver plate. If you don't have a financial gift to give this morning, that's quite all right. Please do come forward, say a silent prayer, and take your blessing. Before we do this, let's speak our offering blessing together. You'll find it on the screens. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I give and all that I receive. Amen. Please come forward as you feel comfortable. As we're seated, our musicians will lead us into a time of meditation.
Everything is sacred. Everything is filled with the divine. We are alive with spirit, with spirit.
Turning inward, we close our eyes, taking a deep breath, feeling safe and relaxed and loved. We turn our attention to Independence Day and the meaning of freedom. We become aware and so grateful for all of those who for hundreds of years have fought to protect our freedoms and our rights as American citizens. But who's in charge of your inner freedom? The freedom to experience joy and love and happiness. You are. You have been given the gift of free will. You alone choose how you will live. You alone choose your attitude. You are free to choose the thoughts to think and the words you wish to speak. Take this time to choose to rest in the silence and receive the guidance from Spirit. Enjoy. Bringing our attention back to this time and space, we honor all of those who fought and sacrificed for our outward freedoms. But we also celebrate that which in us chooses our inward freedom. We are so honored and so blessed, and so it is.